Nia's MOP bucket slammed across the polished marble floor just as Valeria Lang's voice sliced through the glittering lobby. "On your knees!" she snapped. "You filthy woman! You clean what you ruined!" Every receptionist, guard, and junior employee froze in place. Nia stood there in her plain janitor's uniform, water pooling around her worn shoes, her cheeks burning with raw humiliation as Valeria shoved a rag into her hands. Then the manager leaned in closer and hissed, "Women like you should be grateful we let you inside this building at all." A second later, the private elevator chimed. The lobby fell deathly silent because the man stepping out was Darius Kane, the CEO himself, and the humiliated janitor kneeling on his company floor was the wife he cherished most. "Before we go on, tell me honestly, if you saw someone powerless being humiliated in public, would you step in or stay silent to protect yourself? And where are you watching from today?" Drop your country and local time in the comments. If you enjoy emotional, dramatic stories filled with shocking twists, justice, and healing, subscribe and stay with me. Before Nia ever touched a mop inside the Kane Group, she had stood at the glass wall of Darius Kane's penthouse office and looked down at the city glowing beneath them. At night, the skyline of Johannesburg looked almost merciful from that height. Gold lights blurred through the dark like promises. Wealth softened everything from above. Distance made even suffering look small, but Nia had never trusted distance. "You keep staring at that building as if it insulted you personally," Darius said from behind his desk. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. They had been fixed on her for some time, watching the silence gather around her, the way storm clouds gathered above the horizon before rain. Nia did not turn right away. Her fingers rested lightly against the cool glass. "Not the building," she said. "The people inside it." Darius leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie. He was still in the dark suit he had worn to the board meeting, but fatigue had softened the sharpness of his posture. Even tired, he carried authority like something stitched into his bones. What happened this time? Nia finally faced him. She wore no diamonds, no designer labels, nothing that announced she belonged to one of the richest men in the country. A simple cream blouse, a long dark skirt, small gold earrings. Her beauty had always been quiet, but her presence never was. She had the kind of stillness that made careless people uncomfortable. "I visited the main branch this afternoon," she said. Darius's expression changed. "Not much, just enough." "You went there without telling me." "I told your assistant." "That is not the same thing." Nia almost smiled, but the sadness in her eyes held it back. "If I had told you directly, you would have sent 3 people ahead of me, cleaned every corridor, and warned every manager to behave like saints." He said nothing, which was answer enough. She continued, "I walked through the lower service entrance. No one knew who I was. I watched one supervisor throw a box of cleaning supplies at an old woman because she was moving too slowly. I watched a guard get cursed at in front of delivery staff because he asked for a signature on damaged goods. And a young receptionist was crying in a washroom because someone in operations told her she was too poor to speak in meetings." Darius's jaw hardened. Nia stepped closer. "This is not one cruel person having a bad day. It is a culture. It is rot. And rot spreads when powerful people only look at polished floors and quarterly reports." The room fell quiet. Darius lowered his eyes for a moment, then looked back at her. "Who is the operations manager?" "Valeria Lang. She runs that branch as if fear were a leadership strategy." He exhaled slowly. "I have heard her name. Strong performance numbers, high efficiency, good audit language." Nia's laugh was brief and bitter. "Exactly. She speaks the language of people who know how to hide dirt behind shiny surfaces." That stung, because both of them knew it was true. Darius stood and crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, close enough to rest his hands around hers, though he did not do it immediately. He studied her face first. That was one of the things Nia loved most about him. When he looked at her, he did not look quickly. "You are angry," he said. "I am. You are also planning something." Her silence confirmed it. He closed his eyes once, already weary of whatever idea she had formed. "Nia, I want to go in." His eyes opened. "No. I want to work there anonymously." "No." "As a cleaner." "No." She held his gaze. "That branch reveals its real face only to people it thinks do not matter, and that is exactly why you are not going." Nia pulled her hands free and moved away from him. "Do you know why this matters to me?" "I know enough to say no." Her voice sharpened. "No. You know the boardroom reason, the legal reason, the reputation risk, but you do not know the real reason." That made him stop. Nia turned fully toward him then, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "When I was a child," she said, "my mother cleaned schools at night. People threw trash on the floor after watching her sweep. They would walk past her as if she were part of the furniture. Men in offices used to speak to her without ever learning her name. Some days she came home too tired to eat, but she still taught me one thing." Darius listened without moving. "She said, watch how people treat the person who empties their bin. That is where truth lives." The words settled heavily between them. Nia's throat tightened, but she continued. I grew up watching good people shrink because they needed wages more than dignity. So no, Darius, this is not just about one branch. This is about what power becomes when nobody bothers to look down. He stared at her for a long time. Then he asked the question that mattered most. And if they humiliate you, they will reveal themselves. And if they hurt you, she did not answer quickly enough. That silence made something dark flash across his face. Darius crossed the remaining distance and took her shoulders, gentle but firm. You are my wife. Nia's eyes softened. I know. No, he said quietly. I do not think you do, in moments like this. You think I married your courage because it inspires me from a safe distance. I did not. I married all of it, even the part that terrifies me. For a second, the anger in the room cracked and something more fragile showed through. Nia laid a hand over his wrist. And I married a man who says he wants truth even when truth is ugly. He looked away first. That was when she knew she had won half the argument. The other half took more persuasion. It took spreadsheets, internal reports, quiet calls from an outside compliance contact Darius trusted. It took the discovery of unusually high monthly waste supply invoices at the main branch. It took signatures that matched too neatly across multiple forms. It took one confidential email from a junior procurement officer that disappeared from the system less than an hour after it was sent. By the third night, Darius stood in their bedroom, sleeves rolled up, laptop open on the bench at the foot of the bed. There is something wrong there, he admitted. Nia, seated near the window, said nothing. He hated when she was right in silence. The cleaning budget is inflated, he continued. Maintenance requests are being rerouted through favored vendors. Some incident reports are missing attachment logs. Someone is shaping the paperwork. Nia lifted her eyes. Valeria, maybe not alone. That was worse. He shut the laptop and faced her. Even if I accept that you saw cruelty, and even if I accept corruption, sending you in as a janitor is still madness. Nia rose slowly. Not madness, precision. He almost laughed from disbelief. Precision? Yes, because men and women like Valeria do not expose themselves to auditors. They expose themselves to people they think cannot fight back. Her certainty was unbearable because it was logical. Darius rubbed his forehead. If I approve this, I do it with conditions. Nia waited. You use a different surname. No jewelry connected to me. No personal driver. No private contact except the secure number I give you. His tone hardened. And if I say pull out, you pull out. Nia nodded once. He narrowed his eyes. That was too easy. She gave him the first genuine smile of the evening. Because I know there are more conditions coming. There are. He stepped closer. You do not try to be a hero alone. You document. You observe. You do not confront unless you must. And if anyone puts a hand on you, I know. No, he said again, that same quiet intensity rising in him. If anyone puts a hand on you, I do not care what evidence we lose. I will burn that branch down to its foundation. Nia smiled sadly. That is exactly why I did not tell you sooner. He groaned under his breath. Then at last, he reached for her and pulled her into his arms. She rested her cheek against his chest. Under her ear, his heartbeat was steady, but only because he had spent years learning how to cage panic behind discipline. I hate this plan, he murmured into her hair. I know. I hate it more because it sounds necessary. Nia closed her eyes. Then let us find out who people really are. Neither of them noticed the shadow already moving in another part of the city. At the main branch, Valeria Lang was still in her office long after sunset. Her nails tapped against a printed staffing sheet. Her lipstick was perfect. Her suit was immaculate. Her smile, when it came, held no warmth. A new cleaner starts soon, she asked. The HR clerk standing before her nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am. Temporary placement. Name Nia Lovu. Valeria scanned the page with boredom sharpened by instinct. Poor address, no influential references, no degree. No one important, perfect. Put her on lobby rotation, Valeria said. The clerk hesitated. That area is usually assigned to senior staff. Valeria looked up. That was enough. Yes, ma'am, the clerk whispered. After the door closed, Valeria leaned back and smiled to herself. She did not yet know that the woman she had just placed at the very bottom of her hierarchy was the one person in the building she should have feared most. And high above the city, in a home filled with silence and restrained dread, Darius watched Nia fold away her elegant clothes and pack the plain uniforms she would soon wear among people who measured human worth by salary, accent, and shoes. The disguise was simple, the danger was not. Nia's first morning at the main branch began before the polished offices filled with perfume, cologne, and expensive ambition. The service entrance stood behind the building, half hidden beside the loading bay, where delivery trucks came and went like shadows. There was no marble there, no glass meant to impress investors, only stained concrete, buzzing lights, dented metal doors, and the smell of bleach mixed with old rainwater that Nia thought was often where the truth lived. She arrived in a faded gray sweater, plain skirt, and low shoes already worn at the heel. Her hair was wrapped in a simple scarf. There was nothing in her appearance that suggested wealth, influence, or the quiet power of being married to Darius Kane. She carried only a small lunch bag, a cheap notebook, and the employee file that named her Nia Lovu. Inside the service corridor, workers gathered around a broken vending machine, drinking weak coffee from paper cups. Most looked half awake. Some looked defeated before the day had even begun. A heavy silence floated among them, the silence of people who had learned that speaking too freely could cost them rent money. Then a short woman with sharp eyes and broad shoulders approached, holding a ring of keys. "You're the new one," she said. Nia nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The woman frowned immediately. "Do not call me ma'am. I am not rich enough to enjoy it. I'm Tiana." There was something dry in the way she said it, almost humorous, but her face stayed guarded. "Nia," replied Nia. Tiana studied her from head to toe. Her gaze lingered not rudely, but curiously. "You are not from this kind of work." The sentence landed so quickly it nearly pulled a smile from Nia. "I need the job," she said. "That is not what I said." Before Nia could answer, a voice snapped down the corridor. "If everyone is done socializing like school children, maybe we can pretend this is a workplace." Valeria Lang had arrived. Even in the harsh fluorescent light of the service corridor, she looked immaculate. Her cream suit fit like armor. Her heels clicked against concrete with the sharp rhythm of a warning. Red lipstick, gold watch, straight spine. She did not simply enter a room, she claimed it. Every shoulder in the corridor tightened. Valeria's eyes swept across the group until they found Nia. There was nothing dramatic in the glance, but contempt was there all the same, thin and cold as a blade. "So," Valeria said, "this is the new cleaner." No one answered. Valeria looked at the file in her hand. "Nia Lovu, temporary." Her lip curled faintly on the final word. Temporary people are often lazy because they think consequences are temporary too. Let me make this clear. I hate laziness, I hate excuses, and I especially hate people who slow down my building. She handed the file to Tiana without looking at her. "Lobby rotation, ground floor washrooms, executive corridor backup. She covers any gap." Tiana blinked. On her first day, Valeria turned her head. "Did you ask me a question?" "No?" "Good." Nia noticed it then. The smallest flicker in Tiana's jaw, a restraint so practiced it was almost invisible. This was not new. This was routine. Valeria began issuing orders with military briskness, but she did not waste cruelty. She used it efficiently. A late worker was threatened with a written warning. A stock clerk was humiliated for a missing inventory label. A young cleaner with swollen eyes from lack of sleep was told she looked too miserable to be near clients. The girl lowered her head and whispered, "Sorry, ma'am." Valeria moved on without slowing. By the time the morning shift had truly begun, Nia had already learned more about the branch than any report could have told her. People here did not merely fear mistakes, they feared being seen making them. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate beauty. Sunlight poured through huge glass panels and spread across marble floors so glossy they mirrored every movement. Fresh lilies stood in stone vases, reception desks curved like sculpture, even the air smelled expensive. Nia pushed her cleaning cart across that gleaming floor while men in tailored suits strode past without looking at her. Women in silk blouses spoke into headsets and stepped around her bucket as if avoiding a puddle, not a person. She kept her head bowed just enough to avoid attention, but her eyes missed nothing. A receptionist at the front desk, a beautiful young woman with neat braids and trembling hands, dropped a stack of visitor forms. The paper scattered. Before Nia could move, a man from operations muttered loudly, "Of course, some people bring village confusion into every room." The receptionist flushed scarlet and crouched to gather the pages. Nia bent beside her and helped. "Thank you," the young woman whispered. "What is your name?" Nia asked softly. "Amara." Nia handed her the last sheet. "Breathe, Amara. Paper is not blood. No one died." For a second, Amara almost laughed. It looked as if she had not done that in days. Then the operations man turned back and saw them. "If you have time to chat, you have time to polish the brass rails," he said to Nia. His tone was meant to remind her of her place. Nia lowered her gaze. "Yes, sir," but she saw the shame on Amara's face, and it stayed with her long after she moved away. Just before the morning rush peaked, she met Jamal. He was standing at the side security desk near the delivery elevator. Tall despite his age, with graying hair, a tired back, and the kind of dignity poverty had not managed to steal. His uniform was clean but old. One sleeve had been repaired by hand. A supply driver was arguing with him over damaged boxes. "I'm not signing for broken stock," Jamal said firmly. The driver rolled his eyes. "Then sign that you refused it." "I will sign after I report it." You think too much for a guard. Before Jamal could answer, a junior supervisor stormed over, already irritated. What is the problem now? The driver pointed at Jamal. Old man wants to behave like he owns the building. The supervisor did not even inspect the boxes. Just sign the form and move the goods. Jamal stood straighter. The seal is broken. The supervisor stepped closer. Do you want to keep this job? That was the real language of the building. Not efficiency, not standards. Fear. Jamal's eyes dimmed, but he still did not reach for the form. Nia stepped forward with her cart. Sir, she said quietly to the supervisor, there is leaking fluid under the third box. All three men looked down. A dark stain had begun spreading across the cardboard. The supervisor cursed under his breath. The driver immediately began protesting. Jamal looked at Nia once sharply, as if measuring the difference between accidental courage and deliberate intervention. The supervisor snatched the clipboard back. Take it to inspection. The driver swore again. Jamal said nothing until the others were gone. Then he looked at Nia and asked, Did you see that leak just now? Nia met his eyes. No. He almost smiled. Around midday, workers ate in a cramped staff break room far below the elegance of the upper floors. A cracked microwave hummed in one corner. Plastic chairs scraped against tile. Someone had taped a Bible verse to the wall, and someone else had written beneath it in pen, God sees all. The words had been partly scratched out. Nia sat beside Tiana and opened her lunch. 2 boiled eggs, a piece of bread, and fruit. Across the room, Amara sat alone with only tea. Nia rose, walked over, and placed 1 egg and half her bread on the table. Amara looked up in alarm. No, I can't. You can, Nia said, and you will. The girl hesitated, then accepted it with quiet gratitude. At the far end of the room, 2 cleaners exchanged glances. One of them, a round-faced woman named Zora, leaned toward Tiana and whispered, She shares food on the first day? Tiana replied, Either she is a fool or a saint. Nia heard it and pretended not to. By early afternoon, the branch began revealing itself in smaller cruelties. A male executive dropped coffee near a stairwell and snapped his fingers for Nia to clean it while he remained on a call. A procurement officer barked at Zora for replacing soap dispensers too slowly. A senior receptionist publicly blamed Amara for a scheduling error Nia later discovered had come from the manager's own office. Each incident was minor enough to deny, humiliating enough to wound. That was how toxic cultures protected themselves, not always through one monstrous act, but through 1,000 small permissions. Then came the first moment that made Nia's pulse change. She had been sent to reorganize old cleaning stock in a narrow basement storeroom where fluorescent lights flickered above shelves of chemicals, paper goods, and maintenance supplies. The room smelled of detergent and dust. As she moved boxes, she noticed something odd. A small black camera was mounted in the upper corner near the pipework. Its casing was cracked. Dust covered half the lens. At first glance it looked dead, but a faint green light blinked once. Nia froze. Interesting. She kept working, careful not to stare too long. A few minutes later, footsteps outside the storeroom. Voices. One of them was Valeria's. Nia instinctively stepped behind a shelf unit. I told you to adjust the invoice totals before the deadline, Valeria said. A man answered too low for her to recognize immediately. The old numbers are already in the system. Then change the system. There's an audit trail. Then bury it under maintenance corrections like last quarter. Nia's breath slowed. The man hesitated. What about the camera records near receiving? Valeria gave a small dismissive laugh. Half the cameras in this place are decorative. Stop panicking. Their footsteps moved away. Nia waited 3 full seconds before emerging. She stared at the blinking green light in the corner. Decorative, Valeria had said. Maybe, maybe not. A thrill of cold certainty moved through Nia's chest. Under the polished surface of this building, there were already cracks. And by the end of her first day, another thing had become clear. The people with the least power were not blind. They were only waiting to see whether anyone would stand beside them long enough to make truth feel less dangerous. As Nia wheeled her cart back through the service corridor at dusk, Tiana fell into step beside her. You worked too hard for a first day? The older woman muttered. Nia smiled faintly. Is that a complaint? It is suspicion. Nia glanced at her. About what? Tiana adjusted the strap on her worn handbag. About you. Women who have known real softness do not usually survive this place with their backs still straight. Nia looked ahead. Then she answered with careful honesty. Maybe I did not come here to survive it. Tiana stopped walking. Nia kept moving, and behind her in the dim corridor, where exhausted workers disappeared one by one into the evening, the older woman watched with growing unease because the new cleaner did not move like someone entering defeat. She moved like someone counting the doors before the fire started. As the days unfolded, Valeria Lang had decided that Nia was a problem. Not a large one yet, Not the kind that triggered panic, but the kind that irritated her precisely because it refused to break in the usual ways. Most new cleaners at the main branch arrived already apologizing for taking up space. They kept their heads lowered, their answers short, and their fear visible. Valeria understood fear. Fear was efficient. Fear made people faster. Fear made them lie for her, cover for her, sign whatever she placed in front of them, and thank her afterward for not being worse. But Nia did not behave correctly. She obeyed instructions, yet somehow preserved her dignity. She moved quickly, yet never frantically. She accepted insult, yet did not absorb them. And worst of all, she had begun leaving traces of calm wherever she passed through the building. Amara looked steadier. Jamal had stopped shrinking when supervisors barked at him. Even Tiana, who trusted almost no one, had started glancing toward the younger woman with something dangerously close to hope. Hope, Valeria knew, was more contagious than rebellion, so she decided to kill it early. The opportunity came when the message reached her that a regional investment delegate might pass through the lobby. Nothing had been confirmed, but that hardly mattered. Valeria lived for the performance of readiness. She ordered fresh flowers, repositioned the reception displays, and demanded that every brass surface shine as though the building itself had no history, no grime, no frightened staff hidden behind its glamour. Nia was polishing the glass near the lobby entrance when Valeria appeared at her side. "Basement supply room, now," Valeria said. Nia set the cloth down. "Yes, ma'am." The basement supply room was narrow and overstocked, lined with shelves of cleaning fluids, wax paper goods, and backup linen. The air was chemical and close. No windows, no witnesses unless someone happened to pass. Valeria entered behind her, heels clicking on concrete. A young stock assistant followed carrying a clipboard and trying hard to seem invisible. Valeria pointed toward a sealed container on the lower shelf. "Open that." Nia crouched and read the label, Industrial Marble Treatment Solvent. Her fingers paused. "This should not be stored here." Valeria folded her arms. "Did I ask for your opinion?" "No, ma'am." "Then open it." Nia obeyed, but slowly. The chemical smell rose sharp and cold the moment the lid loosened. Too sharp, too strong for a room without ventilation. Valeria stepped back at once. "Take this upstairs and clean the stain near the VIP corridor. I want that floor gleaming." Nia looked up. "This product is too strong for marble if it is not diluted." The stock assistant shifted uncomfortably. Valeria's gaze hardened. "You have been here a short time and suddenly you are a chemist." Nia lowered her eyes. "No, I only read the instructions." Valeria smiled then, but it was not kindness. "How impressive. Perhaps when you finish scrubbing floors we will promote you to consultant. Carry it." Nia lifted the container carefully. It was heavier than it looked. As she followed Valeria upstairs, she noticed the younger woman walking behind them, eyes nervous, clipboard pressed to her chest, saying nothing. The VIP corridor was unusually empty. The cleaning had been done earlier. The marble shone. No stain was visible. Nia stopped. "Where is it?" Valeria pointed near a decorative table beside the wall. "There. You missed the dull patch." Nia saw what Valeria wanted her to see. Not a stain, but a section of floor reflecting light at a slightly different angle. Barely visible. Almost nothing. "Use the whole area," Valeria said. "If one part shines more than another, it looks careless." Something in Nia's chest tightened. Too much product. An almost invisible floor. A corridor used by senior staff. And Valeria watching too closely. A trap. Still, she knelt and began applying as little as possible to the cloth. The solvent bit at the marble, immediately leaving a wet streak darker than the surrounding stone. The stock assistant inhaled sharply. Valeria's voice rang out with theatrical horror. "What have you done?" Nia looked up slowly. The dark streak spread into a blotch. Valeria stepped forward, pointing. "Are you blind? That marble costs more than your yearly wages." People turned at the sound of her voice. A receptionist at the far end froze. Two finance staff emerged from an office. Within seconds, an audience had begun to form, drawn by the scent of humiliation, the way vultures were drawn by blood. Nia arose carefully, solvent container still in hand. "You instructed me to use this?" Valeria gave a laugh of pure disbelief. "So now you are blaming management for your own incompetence?" The stock assistant's face had gone pale. She looked from Valeria to Nia and back again. Valeria pounced. "Tell them what happened." The young woman swallowed. "I brought the supply as requested." "By whom?" A beat too long. "By operations, ma'am." "Not by whom." "Clever." Valeria turned to the growing cluster of staff. "There it is. A simple task. One instruction, and she damages premium imported marble because she thinks rules do not apply to her." Nia's humiliation was now public, which meant it was useful. A man from finance muttered, "These temporary hires ruin everything." Another said, "Why would anyone let untrained people near executive floors?" Nia felt the familiar heat of rage rising inside her, but she kept her face still. Valeria wanted tears, stammering defensiveness. Visible collapse would make the story cleaner. Instead, Nia placed the solvent down gently and said, "The container should never have been removed from basement storage without dilution instructions." Valeria's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Nia had not denied the accident. She had named procedure. That was more dangerous. Valeria stepped closer until they stood almost face to face. "Do you understand what people like you never understand? This company survives on standards, on excellence, on discipline, not on excuses from women who come in through service doors and think reading one label makes them intelligent." The words landed loudly enough for everyone to hear. There it was, the deeper insult. Not just incompetence. Class. Nia heard a breath catch behind her. Amara, standing at the corner with visitor files in her arms, looked stricken. Jamal had appeared too, drawn from his desk by the raised voice. He stood very still, old hands clasped behind his back, his eyes dark with contained anger. Valeria held out her hand to the stock assistant. "The incident form." The clipboard was passed to her. She signed the top line with quick, elegant strokes, then thrust it toward Nia. "Signed." Nia read the form. It stated that she had independently mishandled a restricted cleaning agent after ignoring verbal instruction. It included a clause acknowledging full responsibility for damages and permitting immediate termination pending internal review. She looked up. "This is false." Valeria's smile thinned. "It is generous. I could dismiss you without paperwork." "I will not sign a lie." The corridor went still. Valeria had expected pleading. She had not expected resistance. "Refusal to cooperate is insubordination," Valeria said. "Then write that I refuse to sign something untrue." The finance staff exchanged glances. Now this was becoming interesting. Valeria lowered her voice, which made it more frightening. "Do not mistake stubbornness for courage. Poor women often make that error just before they destroy their own survival." Nia met her eyes. "And cruel women often mistake power for immunity." The silence that followed was so complete that even the air conditioning hum seemed to withdraw. Valeria's face did not move for a second. Then for two. That was how Nia knew she had struck the bone beneath the skin. The manager recovered instantly and turned to the security station at the end of the corridor. "Cade." The young guard stepped forward, shoulders tense. "Escort this employee to administration. She will sign under supervision." Cade did not move. Valeria's voice sharpened. "Now." Cade approached, but his eyes slid once to the floor, then to the solvent container, then to Nia. He had seen something. Maybe not everything. Enough. Nia noticed it. So did Valeria. That made the moment more dangerous. As Cade came closer, Nia let her cleaning rag fall. It landed near the decorative table, and beneath its curved leg she saw it. A plastic card half hidden in shadow. She bent as if to retrieve the rag and palmed the card in one smooth motion. Valeria continued speaking. "This is exactly why temporary staff must be controlled. Give them one corridor, and they imagine they deserve a boardroom." Nia straightened with the rag in one hand and the card concealed in the other. A quick glance confirmed what her fingers had already felt. Restricted supply access. Valeria Lang. Interesting. Very interesting. If Valeria had not personally authorized removal from basement storage, how had her access card ended up on the floor beside the exact site of the accident? Cade stopped beside Nia. Quietly, almost under his breath, he said, "Please come with me." Please. Not a command. A warning. Nia looked at him and saw fear there, but not emptiness, not surrender. As they began walking toward administration, Valeria called after them. "And make sure she understands that refusing cooperation only makes things worse." Nia did not turn around, but she spoke clearly enough for the corridor to hear. "Sometimes," she said, "things get worse because the truth is getting closer." No one answered. Behind her, Valeria's silence felt colder than shouting. By the time they reached the administrative hallway, Cade's hand was trembling near the radio, clipped at his belt. He did not touch her. He did not hurry her. At the door, he spoke without looking directly at her. "I did not see how the chemical got there." Nia said nothing. He swallowed. "But I know who brought the stock request down this morning." That made her turn. His face had gone pale. "If I speak, I lose my job." Nia studied him, then answered softly, "If no one speaks, other people lose more." Pain crossed his expression, sharp and immediate because he knew she was right, but fear still won. For now. He opened the office door. Inside, blank forms waited. So did the machinery of corporate lies. Clean fonts, official language, neat spaces for signatures that could erase a person faster than any insult. Nia entered without bowing her head. In her pocket, Valeria's access card pressed against her palm like a pulse. Not enough yet, but enough to prove one thing. This had not been an accident. And somewhere inside the widening cracks of the branch, at least one witness was already beginning to break. That evening, when Nia returned to the apartment she shared with Darius, the silence between them had weight. Not because they were angry, because both of them already understood that the day had crossed a line. The apartment sat high above the city, all clean lines, warm light, and soft surfaces chosen with care rather than extravagance. It was beautiful in the restrained way Darius liked beautiful things to be. Nothing shouted. Everything endured. Yet that night, even the calm of the place seemed unable to settle the storm Nia had carried home inside her body. She placed her worn work shoes by the door and stood for a moment without moving. Darius emerged from his study almost immediately, as if he had been listening for the sound of her key. He had taken off his jacket, but not his tension. One look at her face and something in his expression hardened. What happened? Nia did not answer right away. She walked past him into the living room, set down her lunch bag, and only then turned. Valeria made her move. That was enough. Darius's jaw locked. Tell me. So she told him everything. The supply room, the solvent, the corridor, the audience, the incident form, the words Valeria had used when she wanted to reduce Nia from a person to a category. Poor women, service doors, people like you. Darius listened without interrupting, but the stillness in him was now dangerous. It was not calm. It was restraint under strain. When Nia finished, she reached into her pocket and held out the plastic access card. Valeria Lang, restricted supply access. Darius took it from her with careful fingers, as if it were evidence from a crime scene. In a way it was. She dropped this at the site, Nia said. Either she was there personally, or she was foolish enough to pass through before the scene was staged. Darius stared at the card for a long second, then set it on the table with too much precision. I am ending this, he said. Nia's eyes narrowed. No. He looked at her sharply. She used industrial solvent to set you up in a public corridor. And now we know she is reckless. And now I know she is close enough to you to engineer worse. Nia stepped forward. Darius. No. His voice rose for the first time. You do not get to say my name like that and make this sound smaller than it is. The room went still. For a moment, both of them stood inside the truth. Neither wanted to name how his fear had shifted shape. It was no longer about suspicion or theory. It was about the image of his wife kneeling on a marble floor while people watched her being destroyed for sport. Nia softened first. She is losing patience, she said quietly. That means pressure is working. It also means she is escalating. Yes. And you say that as if it is acceptable. It is useful. He laughed once without humor. Useful. Nia moved closer until only the length of one breath stood between them. You asked me once if I understood what it meant to be your wife. Let me ask you something now. Do you understand what it means to be my husband? The question hit harder than accusation. Darius held her gaze. It means, Nia continued, you do not marry a woman like me and then ask me to look away when power crushes people beneath its shoes. It means you trust that my conscience is not a hobby. It is part of who I am. Pain flickered in his face, not because she was wrong, but because she was right in the exact place that hurt. He sank slowly onto the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. She called you poor, he said after a while, his voice low again. Nia almost smiled, though the smile carried no joy. I have been poor before. The word itself cannot wound me. His eyes lifted to hers. But contempt can. Nia did not deny it. That was when the quiet broke open in a different way. Darius leaned back and shut his eyes for a moment. My mother called this afternoon. Nia stiffened. Of all the things that could darken a room, that was one of them. What did she want? She heard a version of the story. His mouth tightened. Not the truth. Just enough gossip to be offended. Nia said nothing. She wanted to know whether it was true that my wife was working in one of our branches disguised as a cleaner. He gave a short, bitter breath. She did not ask if you were safe? Nia turned away and walked toward the window. Below, the city shimmered in expensive indifference. And what did she ask? Nia said. Darius stood now too, but more slowly. Whether you understood the embarrassment you were bringing on the family. The sentence landed with brutal familiarity. Not because it was new, because it was exactly the kind of wound wealth often inflicted without ever calling itself cruelty. Nia wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from memory. Eleanor Kane had never openly screamed at her. That would have been easier to fight. Eleanor preferred polished disappointment, elegant disapproval, the kind that smiled across dining tables while quietly measuring whether Nia was refined enough, visible enough, useful enough to stand beside her son in public. She never attacked directly when witnesses were present. She made exclusion look like standards. Nia had survived that kind of woman before. It still exhausted her. She thinks I'm humiliating you, Nia said. She thinks image is a form of truth. Nia looked back at him. And what do you think? His answer came at once. I think my family has spent too many years admiring polished people. That pulled silence over them again, but this silence was fuller, layered with older battles. When Darius's father had died years earlier, Darius had inherited not only wealth and responsibility, but a family culture built on display. His mother had survived grief by clinging to control. Appearances became structure, reputation became religion. Darius had rebelled in the only way powerful men were sometimes allowed to rebel quietly. He changed systems, policies, priorities, but he did not always challenge his mother directly. Some part of him still carried the son who had once mistaken peace for duty. Nia had always known that, and tonight that truth stood between them. "Did you defend me?" she asked. He did not flinch. "Yes." She waited. "I told her she would not speak about you as if you were a stain to be managed." Something in Nia's shoulders loosened, but she asked because there was always a but with families like his. Darius's eyes darkened. "But she said Valeria called her personally last week?" Nia turned fully. "What?" He nodded once. "Apparently Valeria has been keeping close to my mother through charity committees and business events. Polite updates, flattery, carefully timed loyalty." Nia's mind sharpened instantly. There it was. Not just a manager with arrogance, a manager with access. "What did Valeria tell her?" Nia asked. "That staff standards were slipping, that some workers lacked discipline, that lower-level recruitment needed stricter oversight." His mouth turned cold. She was laying groundwork. Nia let out a slow breath. Twist by twist, the structure beneath the surface was becoming visible. Valeria had not merely been abusing workers in isolation. She had been curating an image upward while tightening fear downward. She knew where influence lived. She fed it. "She used your mother," Nia said. Darius shook his head. "Worse, my mother made herself usable." The honesty of that sentence cost him something. Nia saw it. He rarely spoke of Eleanor with anger. Pain, yes. Frustration, often. But anger meant he had crossed from disappointment into recognition. He walked toward the drinks cabinet, poured water, then stopped before taking a sip. "Do you know what frightens me most?" Nia watched him. "That Valeria feels protected." He set the glass down untouched. "People like her only grow this bold when they believe someone above them values polish more than justice. She thinks she knows how this family works. She thinks if the scandal comes down to her word against yours, enough people will instinctively side with the woman in the tailored suit over the cleaner with tired shoes." Nia's gaze lowered briefly because he was right. Not only about Valeria, about the world. That was why stories like this were possible. That was why cruelty thrived so easily in elegant places. Then Darius's secure phone buzzed on the side table. He picked it up, read the screen, and his expression changed. "What is it?" Nia asked. He looked up. One of the outside compliance analysts flagged something from old branch expense reports. Her pulse quickened. "What kind of something?" "Repeated executive hospitality charges routed through facilities maintenance." He handed her the phone. Small amounts individually, large together. Nia scanned the numbers. Cleaning budgets, vendor adjustments, event support, replacement material fees, all dull enough to hide in plain sight. All slightly wrong. "She is bleeding the branch through maintenance channels," Nia said. "Not just her," Darius replied. "At least one person in finance signed off." The room sharpened around them. This was no longer only about abuse. It was a machine, and machines were harder to destroy than monsters because machines wore procedure as camouflage. Nia handed the phone back. "Then I stay." Darius looked at her for a long moment. He hated the conclusion because it was logical. Finally he said, "If my mother contacts you directly, you tell me." Nia nodded. "If Valeria escalates again, you tell me immediately." She nodded again. "And if you sense real physical danger, I will pull back." He stepped closer. "Promise me properly." Nia placed her hand in his. "I promise I will not protect the mission by sacrificing myself." That, more than anything, was the promise he needed. He lifted her hand to his lips and held it there for a second too long. Across the city, in a mansion lit for an intimate dinner, Eleanor Kane was finishing a call with Valeria Lang. "You have always been loyal," Eleanor said smoothly. Valeria lowered her eyes, though no one in the room could see the smile forming there. "I only care about protecting what your family built." "And this girl in this branch?" "A disruptive influence," Valeria said. "The kind that creates disorder among workers." Eleanor's voice cooled. "Then handle it discreetly. The Kane name does not need more embarrassment." When the call ended, Valeria set down her phone and smiled fully at last. Above her, chandeliers glittered. Around her, polished people discussed philanthropy and market confidence. No one in that room knew they had just reinforced the hand of a woman standing at the center of fraud, class cruelty, and quiet destruction. And far away in the stillness of an apartment where truth was becoming more expensive by the day, Nia realized the branch was not the only battlefield. The rot had roots. Some of them reached all the way into the family whose name stood on the building. As the days passed, the main branch had changed in a way only frightened people could detect. Nothing visible had shifted. The marble still gleamed. The reception desks still curved like expensive promises. Valeria Lang still moved through the building in tailored perfection. Her voice crisp, her authority intact. To an outsider, the branch looked efficient, disciplined, even admirable. But under that polished surface, tension had thickened. Whispers ended when certain doors opened. People looked over their shoulders before speaking, and whenever Nia entered a room, she felt the strange weight of cautious expectation, as if the workers had begun to sense that something was moving beneath the floorboards, but had not yet decided whether it was rescue or collapse. The first crack opened on an afternoon when Nia was restocking paper towels in the women's washroom near the lower conference wing. She heard sharp voices from the corridor outside. She paused, one hand on the metal dispenser. A woman was crying. Not loudly, not the dramatic kind of crying that drew sympathy. This was quieter, uglier, the sound of someone trying not to make pain inconvenient for other people. Nia stepped into the corridor and saw Zora. The cleaner stood near her linen trolley with her shoulders hunched and her hands trembling so badly that the inventory sheet kept slipping from her fingers. Beside her stood a junior accounting clerk, irritated rather than concerned. "I'm telling you what I was told," he snapped. "The missing petty cash was found in your locker area. You can explain it to operations." Zora stared at him in disbelief. "That is impossible." "Then explain the envelope." "I never touched any envelope." The clerk shrugged. "Tell it to Valeria." That name alone drained the color from Zora's face. The clerk walked away before she could say anything else. Nia approached slowly. "Zora." Zora turned, embarrassed to be seen. She scrubbed at her wet cheeks with the heel of her hand. "I'm fine." "No, you are not." Zora gave a broken laugh. "Does it matter?" That question was the true sickness of the place. Not whether an accusation was false, but whether innocence still had any practical value. Nia lowered her voice. "Tell me everything." At first, Zora resisted out of habit more than mistrust. People in the branch had learned that explaining their suffering often only provided better material for their humiliation. But something in Nia's stillness made concealment feel less necessary. So Zora spoke. She had worked at this branch for years. She was always early, never wrote back to supervisors, took overtime whenever it appeared, sent most of her wages to her mother and two younger siblings. Recently, Valeria had started pressuring cleaners to sign supply receipts for stock they had never seen. Zora had refused twice, politely. Since then, her shifts had worsened, her warnings had multiplied, her pay had arrived short with vague deductions nobody would explain. And now this? "Petty cash," Zora whispered. "I do not even handle cash. They know that." Nia's mind moved quickly. "Who told you the envelope was found near your locker?" "The accounting clerk. He said finance logged it this morning." "Did he show it to you?" "No." "Did anyone search in front of you?" Zora shook her head. "Interesting. Where is Valeria now?" Nia asked. "Administration office. She told me to report there soon." Nia glanced at the clock on the corridor wall. "Enough time. Come with me," Nia said. Zora recoiled. "No. If she sees me with you, she will make it worse." "She is already making it worse. That is exactly why I should not fight alone." Nia looked at her carefully. This was not cowardice. It was economic terror. People who had been poor long enough learned to calculate survival in humiliations. A lie could be endured. Unemployment could not. Nia softened her tone. "You do not have to fight. Just let me walk with you." Zora hesitated. Then, with the helplessness of someone too tired to defend herself alone, she nodded. Administration was colder than the rest of the building. The air conditioning set low enough to sharpen discomfort. Valeria stood beside a desk, one manicured hand resting on a slim folder. Next to her sat a finance officer Nia recognized from previous mornings. A cautious man named Pierce who had perfected the art of never appearing fully responsible for anything. Valeria's eyes narrowed the instant she saw Nia beside Zora. "I asked for one employee," she said. Nia answered evenly. Zora was distressed. "I accompanied her." Valeria smiled without warmth. "How charitable. Perhaps you can accompany her out of the building when this is over." Zora flinched. Valeria opened the folder and slid out a photocopy of a cash envelope log. This morning, a petty cash envelope allocated for emergency hospitality expenses went missing from lower finance processing. During a routine internal search, an identical envelope was found in a storage zone near cleaner lockers. Zora's lips parted in disbelief. "Near is not in." Valeria ignored her. "Given recent concerns about staff honesty, we are investigating all support workers with access to that corridor." "Then investigate all of them," Nia said. Pierce looked up sharply. Valeria turned slowly. "Did I invite your opinion?" "No," Nia replied, "but fairness does not usually wait for invitations." A dangerous silence followed. Valeria tapped the photocopy. Zora signed this acknowledgement of inquiry and suspension pending review. Nia reached for the paper before Zora could. Valeria's voice iced over. Put that down. Nia read quickly. It was another trap disguised as procedure. The form did not merely confirm suspension, it stated that Zora had been linked to unauthorized possession of company funds and agreed to cooperate in possible recovery arrangements. Recovery arrangements? A beautiful phrase for forced admission. She cannot sign this, Nia said. She can and she will. It states misconduct before any proof has been shown. Pierce shifted in his chair. Nia noticed. So did Valeria. The manager's patience thinned. You seem very interested in internal documentation for someone employed to empty bins. And you seem very interested, Nia replied, in securing signatures before facts. The words landed hard enough to make Pierce glance toward the door. Men like him hated conflict when it approached the edge of truth. Valeria turned to him. Please confirm that the envelope was found near the cleaner lockers. Pierce cleared his throat. That is what I was informed. Informed by whom? He hesitated. Valeria cut in smoothly. Facility support. Too smooth. Too quick. Nia looked at Pierce directly. Did you personally see the envelope recovered? He did not answer. Valeria's voice sharpened. This is not a courtroom. No, Nia said, because courtrooms usually care more about evidence. Zora let out a tiny sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite shock. Valeria heard it and rage flashed across her face before she buried it again. Enough, Valeria snapped. Zora, sign now or leave this office unemployed and under formal suspicion. There it was, the real instrument, not proof. Force. Zora stared at the paper. Her hands shook so violently she could barely hold the pen. Nia saw something in that moment she had seen years earlier in her mother's eyes. The instant a poor person began negotiating with a lie because truth had become too expensive. She stepped forward and placed one hand over the form. No. Valeria's eyes blazed. Move. No. Do not mistake your recent dramatics for influence. Nia did not move her hand. Then the office door opened behind them. Everyone turned. Amara stood there, pale and breathless, clutching a file stack to her chest. I'm sorry, she stammered. I was told to bring these. She froze as she took in the tension. Valeria's irritation became immediate opportunity. Perfect. Since everyone is collecting witnesses today, perhaps you can confirm who passed through lower finance this morning. Amara blinked. I don't know. You were at the desk? Yes, but did you or did you not see cleaners in that corridor? Amara's fear was almost physical. Nia could see it swallowing her voice. Then something changed. Amara looked at Zora, then at Nia, then at Valeria, and for the first time since Nia had met her, the young receptionist chose discomfort over silence. I saw your assistant go down there, Amara whispered. The room stilled. Valeria's face went blank. Amara kept going, though her voice shook. This morning, before the complaint, he had a brown envelope and asked whether anyone from finance had logged petty cash yet. Pierce sat up straighter. Valeria smiled slowly, dangerously. Are you accusing staff without understanding workflow? Amara nearly collapsed under that gaze. No, ma'am. I'm only saying what I saw. That was enough. Not proof yet, but enough. Pierce cleared his throat and reached for the suspension form. Perhaps we should delay documentation until chain of custody is clarified. Valeria turned on him. Excuse me? He adjusted his glasses. Only temporarily, to avoid procedural exposure. Procedural exposure? There it was again, the language respectable cowards used when conscience had to travel through self-interest before it could speak. Still, it helped. Valeria realized it too. Her eyes moved across the room calculating. Zora was no longer alone. Amara had spoken. Pierce had retreated from certainty. The moment was slipping. She closed the folder with controlled force. Very well, no suspension yet. Zora returns to limited duty pending review. Zora looked stunned. Nia saw the deeper truth immediately. Valeria was not backing down because she doubted herself. She was withdrawing because she had felt resistance and needed time to reshape the story. That meant the branch was shifting, and Valeria knew it. Outside the office, Zora nearly collapsed against the corridor wall. Why did you do that? She whispered. Nia held her steady. Because they counted on you being too frightened to ask for proof. Zora's eyes filled again, but this time with something less broken than before. No one has ever stood there for me. Nia said nothing. Some truths should not be answered too quickly. At the far end of the corridor, Cade stood near the security desk, pretending to check a logbook. He had clearly heard enough to understand what had happened. Their eyes met for one brief second, and in that second Nia saw it plainly. His silence was no longer comfortable. Good. Later that evening, as Nia cleaned the lower records room, her secure phone vibrated once in the hidden inner pocket of her bag. A coded message from Darius. External review confirms branch maintenance contracts inflated. Repeated ghost vendor patterns not random. Nia stared at the words. So it was true. The cruelty inside the branch was not merely a character flaw in one vicious manager. It was part of a wider machine. Money rerouted through maintenance, false documentation, intimidation used to suppress inconvenient workers, and class hierarchy weaponized to keep the lowest paid staff too afraid to question anything. The branch was not sick by accident. It had been designed this way. Nia slipped the phone away and stood still in the dim records room, dust floating through the beam of a single overhead light. Somewhere upstairs, Valeria Lang was already rewriting the morning in her mind, preparing the next blow. Somewhere outside the building, Darius was following the financial trail deeper into shadow. And inside the branch itself, truth had just done something small but irreversible. It had found its first voices. As more days passed, Valeria Lang stopped pretending that Nia was merely inconvenient. Now she treated her like contamination. The change was subtle to anyone who did not understand power. There were no open threats in the lobby, no public speeches, no dramatic confrontations in front of glass doors and polished executives. Valeria was too experienced for that. When cruelty matured, it learned to wear administration. Schedules changed without notice. Break times disappeared from the roster. Locker access became temporarily restricted. A note appeared on Nia's file claiming she had demonstrated disruptive interpersonal tendencies. It was the kind of language that sounded respectable in meetings and lethal in payroll systems. By the end of the shift, 3 cleaners who usually sat near her in the staff room had stopped making eye contact. Not because they hated her, but because they were afraid of being seen beside her. Nia understood that. Fear had a way of isolating people before punishment even arrived. Still, the loneliness of it settled under her skin. That afternoon, when she arrived at the staff quarters used by lower-wage temporary workers, she found her bedding folded and placed outside the narrow room she had been assigned. A plastic bag held the rest of her belongings, her spare uniform, her notebook, her soap, her scarf. Pinned to the bag was a typed notice. Accommodation, privilege withdrawn pending conduct review. No signature, no explanation, only the cold efficiency of removal. Tiana stood in the corridor nearby, arms folded tightly across her chest. I came as soon as I heard. Nia looked down at the bag, then back up. Who delivered it? Facilities clerk. Said the order came from operations, meaning Valeria. Of course. Tiana's face was grim. You can sleep in my room tonight. Nia's first instinct was gratitude. Her second was caution. If they see that, they already see everything, Tiana snapped, then lowered her voice. Let them. That mattered more than either woman said out loud. Before Nia could answer, footsteps sounded from the stairwell. 2 cleaners entered the corridor, saw her things outside the room, and immediately looked away. One muttered a greeting too quickly. The other said nothing at all. Tiana watched them go with a bitterness that had clearly been earned over years. That is how this place works. First they humiliate you, then they make everyone choose whether survival is worth pretending not to know you. Nia knelt and lifted her bag. Most people here do not get to choose with full freedom. No, Tiana said, but some still choose better than others. That night, Nia slept on a thin mattress laid across the floor beside Tiana's bed. The room was tiny and warm, its single window half jammed. The curtains faded from too many years in harsh sun, yet it held a kind of dignity no executive suite could fake. Shoes neatly aligned, a Bible on the crate that served as a bedside table, a photograph of 2 children in school uniforms pinned to the wall. Your grandchildren? Nia asked quietly before the light went out. Tiana nodded. My daughter's children. She works nights. Nia studied the picture for a moment. They're beautiful. They are expensive, Tiana muttered, and that pulled a tired laugh from both of them. Then the dark settled. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Tiana said, You should leave. Nia turned her head on the thin pillow. You don't mean that. I do tonight. The older woman's voice was rough with worry. Valeria is not trying to discipline you anymore. She is trying to erase you. Nia stared into the darkness. Tiana continued. I have worked in buildings like this for years. I know the rhythm. First they isolate, then they stain your name, then they create one incident so serious that no one remembers how small it began. Nia's hand tightened over the blanket. I know. Do you? Tiana asked. Because you still speak as if truth has good timing. The line sat between them for a long time. Then Nia answered softly, No, truth usually arrives late, but it still matters when it comes. Tiana made no reply. The next morning, Valeria escalated. Rumor reached Nia before breakfast. She heard it in fragments. First, 2 stock clerks whispering by the loading dock. One cleaner suddenly going silent when she entered the corridor. A security aide smirking as if he knew something dirty. By mid-morning, the story had sharpened. The new cleaner was not just difficult. She was ambitious, Manipulative. The sort of woman who acted poor, flirted with senior men, and then stirred sympathy when people resisted her. By late morning, a version of the rumor had grown uglier. Valeria was implying that Nia had been trying to get the attention of influential staff, including a senior regional director who had recently passed through the branch. Nia stood in the washroom, gripping the edge of a sink when she first heard the full version from Amara. The young receptionist looked sick with shame just repeating it. They're saying you smile too much at management, that you ask questions to make yourself noticeable, that you pretend to be kind so men will want to help you. For 1 second, rage flashed hot and pure through Nia's body. Not because the accusation was believable, but because it was strategic. Class contempt had not broken her. Professional sabotage had not broken her. So Valeria had reached for the oldest weapon used against women who refused to stay small, stain her morally, make dignity look like seduction, make courage look like calculation. Nia let out one slow breath. Who's spreading it directly? Amara hesitated. Not always Valeria herself, her assistant, 2 people in operations, and her eyes lowered. Some women are repeating it too. Of course they were. Cruel systems survive by recruiting the wounded. Nia straightened. Thank you for telling me. Amara grabbed her wrist. Be careful. She wants you angry. I know, but knowing did not make it easier. Just after noon, Cade found her near the service stairwell. He looked worse than usual. Eyes bloodshot, uniform slightly misbuttoned, shoulders drawn tight as wire. He checked the corridor before speaking. They're setting you up again. Nia's pulse shifted. How? He swallowed hard. Stock loss report. Cleaning chemicals and replacement filters. They're going to say you moved materials out through service exit 3. They already changed one of the access locks. Nia stared at him. How do you know? Because I was told to sign off on a corrected movement sheet. His voice nearly broke on the word corrected. I haven't signed it yet. That mattered. Who told you? Cade looked over his shoulder again. Valeria's assistant delivered it. Said operations wants it closed before external review. He finally met her eyes. Nia, I can't keep doing this. The words came out like confession. Nia saw the exhaustion in him, then not only fear, but self-disgust. He had been surviving by silence so long that silence was beginning to poison him. Then don't, she said. He laughed once bitterly. Easy for you to say. No, she replied. Not easy. Necessary. Cade pressed a hand over his mouth for a moment, then lowered it. There's more. Her body went still. He spoke faster now, as if stopping would destroy his nerve. Preston copied something from stores last night. Delivery records, vendor codes. He said the branch is signing for maintenance stock that never arrives. His breathing quickened. He said if something happens to him, I should remember that Valeria panics when paperwork leaves the building. Nia's eyes sharpened instantly. Where is he now? He was supposed to meet me by the old generator room during lunch, but Cade's face had gone pale. He never came. Nia moved before the thought finished forming. The old generator room sat behind the secondary loading area near a disused maintenance lane where broken pallets and obsolete equipment were stacked against a chain-link fence. Hardly anyone passed there unless they had reason. Nia, Cade, and Amara, who insisted on coming once she heard enough to understand danger, reached the area within minutes. At first, nothing looked wrong. Then Nia saw the papers. A few printed sheets lay scattered in dirty rainwater near the wall, trampled and half-soaked. Vendor numbers, supplier columns, partial signatures, and beyond them, half hidden behind 2 stacked crates, lay Preston. He was conscious, but barely. A cut split the side of his forehead. One sleeve was dark with blood near the elbow. His breathing was shallow, shocked more than broken, but pain twisted across his face the moment he tried to lift himself. Amara gasped. Cade swore under his breath and dropped beside him. What happened? Preston's eyes fluttered open. When he saw Nia, relief and urgency collided in his expression. Phone, he whispered. Nia crouched at once. Where? He moved his uninjured hand weakly toward his trouser pocket. She retrieved the cheap phone and saw the screen cracked but alive. Audio, he rasped. Sent it to draft. Not safe. Nia's pulse hammered. What happened here? She asked. Preston swallowed, wincing. I heard them. Near records. Valeria and Pierce talking about ghost vendors and the cleaner they need to bury. His eyes found hers with effort. Meant you. A chill moved through her. Did they do this? He shut his eyes for a second, then opened them again. Someone came from behind. I didn't see. His breath caught. But they were scared. That means we're close. Cade looked shattered. Amara was already pulling out her phone to call for emergency help. Nia unlocked Preston's device, found the draft message, and opened the audio file. Only seconds long, but even before she played it, she knew. This was not just rumor now, not just suspicion, not just scattered cruelty wearing office language. This was evidence being defended with violence. As voices approached from the far corridor, Too many footsteps too fast. Nia slipped the phone into her pocket and rose. Whoever had realized Preston was still alive was coming back. And for the first time since she entered the branch, the danger no longer felt administrative. It felt immediate. The footsteps came fast, not the measured pace of staff heading to lunch, not the casual movement of employees crossing service corridors without urgency. These were purposeful steps, too many of them, sharp with the kind of panic people try to disguise as authority. Nia turned instantly. "Cade, stay with him," she said. Amara was already kneeling beside Preston, one shaking hand pressed near his shoulder, the other clutching her phone as she tried to explain their location to emergency services without letting her fear swallow her words. Nia moved toward the mouth of the maintenance lane just as two facilities men rounded the corner, followed by Valeria's assistant and a branch nurse carrying a first aid kit, too neatly, too quickly, as if the scene had already been anticipated. Valeria herself arrived a second later. Her cream blouse was flawless. Her expression was arranged in professional alarm. To anyone who did not know her, she might have looked concerned. To Nia, she looked furious. "Oh my God," Valeria said, pressing a hand lightly to her chest. "What happened?" The lie was so polished it almost shimmered. Preston made a broken sound behind them. Cade rose halfway, eyes burning now with something closer to anger than fear. Nia stepped fully into the corridor, blocking the most direct view of Preston's phone pocket, though the phone itself was already hidden in her uniform. "He was attacked," she said. Valeria's gaze flickered once to the wet papers near the crates, then back to Nia. Attacked? Or did he fall while trespassing in a restricted area? There it was. The story had arrived quickly, already shaped. One of the facilities men bent to gather the scattered sheets, but Nia's voice cut across the corridor like a blade. "Do not touch those." He froze. Valeria smiled thinly. "You seem very eager to manage scenes that are above your pay grade." "And you seem very eager," Nia replied, "to control evidence before security logs are reviewed." The word evidence landed. So did security logs. Everyone in the corridor heard it. Cade straightened fully. For the first time since Nia had met him, he looked at Valeria without dropping his eyes. "I want the area sealed," he said. Valeria turned slowly toward him. "Excuse me?" "I said the area should be sealed," he repeated louder now. His voice shook but only slightly. "Until the branch incident team reviews it." Silence. That one sentence changed the air because it did not come from Nia. It came from someone the system had counted on staying obedient. Valeria's face did not move, but her voice cooled by several degrees. "Guard Cade, I suggest you remember chain of command." Cade swallowed. "And I suggest we follow policy." It was a small act of defiance, but everyone felt its cost. Valeria took one step toward him, ready to crush it. Then another sound interrupted the moment. The private elevator near the executive side corridor chimed, not nearby, not visible from where they stood, but close enough that the entire branch seemed to feel it. Every head turned instinctively. No one in the lower operational areas expected executive movement at that hour. Not without notice, not without a staged reception, not without Valeria being prepared. A junior receptionist hurried down the corridor, breathless. She stopped when she saw the scene. "Ma'am," she said to Valeria, voice unsteady, "the CEO is here." For 1 second no one moved. Then several things happened at once inside Valeria's face. Shock, calculation, then control rushed back over all of it. "Why was I not informed?" she snapped. The receptionist blinked. "He didn't come through the main lobby." Of course he didn't, Nia thought. Darius had chosen his entrance carefully. Valeria recovered quickly. "Clear this corridor immediately. We will handle this internally after I receive him." "No," Nia said. The word stopped everyone. Valeria turned to her with slow disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said no." This time the silence was heavier because even Amara felt it, even the nurse felt it, even the two facilities men who had spent years surviving by moving only when instructed felt the danger of the line Nia had just crossed. Valeria stepped closer until only a foot separated them. "You are a cleaner," she said quietly, each word sharpened to injure. "You do not tell me what happens in my branch." Nia held her gaze. "And you do not get to bury an injured employee and contaminated records because you are afraid of who is walking through the building." The accusation struck hard enough that one of the facilities men looked down immediately. Valeria's eyes flashed. "Be careful." "No," Nia replied. "You should be." For the first time, raw hatred showed through Valeria's perfect posture. Then footsteps sounded again. These were different, measured, controlled, fewer. Darius Kane turned the corner, flanked by 2 senior compliance officers and 1 regional legal director. He was dressed in a dark charcoal suit, no tie, his coat still carrying the cool sharpness of outside air. He did not look like a man arriving for ceremony. He looked like a man who had already decided something. The corridor changed around him the way rooms always change around real power. People stood straighter, voices vanished, even fear reorganized itself. Nia felt her chest tighten, not because she had not expected him, but because she had, and because she did not know what he was about to do. Darius's eyes found the scene in one sweep. Preston on the ground, Amara kneeling beside him, Cade rigid with strain, wet pages near the crates, Valeria poised in her careful outrage, and Nia standing in the middle of it all in her plain cleaner's uniform, face calm, shoulders straight, danger pressing in on her from every side. For the briefest instant, something fierce and private moved behind his eyes. Then it vanished. His expression settled into executive distance. "Report," he said. He did not say Nia's name. He did not rush to her. He did not reveal anything. The pain of that landed before she could stop it. Valeria stepped in at once, smooth and ready. "Mr. Kane, we have had a regrettable safety incident involving a support worker who appears to have entered a restricted maintenance zone." She was just about to secure the matter when Cade spoke over her. "He didn't fall." The whole corridor jolted. Valeria turned on him. "Cade." "He didn't fall," Cade repeated louder now. His face had gone pale, but he kept going. "And there were papers here, records. Someone tried to move them." Darius's gaze shifted to him. "Your basis?" Cade swallowed. "I was told to sign an altered movement sheet this morning related to stock loss." His breathing quickened. "I refused." One of the compliance officers immediately stepped toward the papers. Valeria moved to intercept. "Those documents may be unrelated operational materials. We should not create confusion by—" Darius lifted one hand. She stopped. That one gesture was quiet. It was also absolute. "Anything on this floor is now under review," Darius said. His voice was calm enough to frighten people. The compliance officer crouched and began photographing the scattered sheets before touching them. The legal director spoke softly into her phone, requesting medical response and immediate records lockdown. Valeria stood very still. Darius finally looked at Nia, only for a second, only as CEO to employee. "Were you present when he was found?" Nia felt every eye in the corridor shift toward her. Yes, she thought. Present, humiliated, used, tested, left standing in front of a man who belonged to her in private and was pretending not to know her in public. "Yes," she said evenly. "He was conscious when we reached him." "We?" Darius asked. "Amara, Cade, and I." He nodded once, nothing more. The restraint of it cut deeper than cruelty would have. Because she understood why he was doing it. He could not expose her yet. Not here, not before the larger machinery was secured. Not before records, vendors, accomplices, and family connections were all cornered together. But understanding did not soften the loneliness of standing in front of her husband while he wore indifference like a shield. Valeria saw that flicker of hurt and misread it. Excellent, she thought. He does not care about her. The mistake strengthened her. "Mr. Kane," she said carefully with respect, "I should warn you that this particular employee has caused repeated disruption. She interferes in routine disciplinary matters, encourages insubordination among lower staff, and inserts herself into administrative procedures without authority." Nia did not look at her. She looked at Darius. He gave no sign that he knew the full cruelty behind those words. "Noted," he said. The single word hit Nia like cold water. Amara stared in disbelief. Cade's shoulders fell an inch. Even Preston's half-conscious state seemed to drift toward despair. Valeria felt a victory warming her from within. Yes, she thought. Good. Let him hear it first from me. Then Darius turned to the compliance officers. "Separate every involved staff member for statement intake," he said. "No internal supervision, no branch management filtering." The temperature of the corridor seemed to change. Valeria's smile faltered. "Mr. Kane," she said, "that seems excessive for a local personnel matter." Darius's eyes moved to her fully at last. This stopped being local when falsified maintenance records crossed into assault proximity. No one breathed. Valeria recovered quickly, but not completely. Assault proximity, Darius spoke as if discussing weather. Ghost vendors, inflated branch maintenance contracts, altered inventory flow, missing documentation trails. He took one step closer. "Would you like me to continue, Ms. Lang?" The blood drained from her face. Not enough for collapse, enough for truth. Still she fought. "These are serious accusations. If someone has been feeding you false impressions—" "Someone has," Darius said. Valeria's eyes brightened with sudden hope. Then he continued. "Several people, in fact. That is why I am here." The hope died. Nia watched him and understood what he was doing. He was not rescuing her. Not yet. He was tightening the room. He was making everyone speak first. And in that cruel, disciplined delay lay the shape of the larger trap. Valeria realized it too late. Because at that exact moment, Preston stirred behind them and forced out three ragged words before pain took him again. Check her assistants. Then he lost consciousness. Amara gasped. Cade dropped to his knees beside him again. The nurse rushed forward. Darius's face changed, not visibly for most people, but enough for Nia to see the steel beneath it. He turned to legal. Detain all system access under operations. Then to security. No one leaves this branch without authorization. Then finally to Valeria. Your branch, he said quietly, is about to tell me what it has been hiding. And for the first time since he entered, Valeria Lang looked less like a woman in command and more like someone standing on ice she had just heard crack beneath her own feet. Still, she was not finished. Still, she believed she might survive. And standing there in her plain uniform, carrying both hurt and certainty inside the same steady body, Nia understood the true shape of the moment. Darius had come, but not to save her from humiliation. He had come to let the whole branch think she was still unprotected for just long enough to make the guilty expose themselves all the way. For the next stretch, the main branch stopped functioning as an office and became something far more dangerous. A reckoning. Staff were separated into conference rooms under compliance supervision. Security logs were frozen. Computer access across operations and facilities began shutting down one terminal at a time. The usual murmur of corporate routine, phones ringing, printers humming, assistants crossing polished hallways with curated urgency, gave way to a brittle quiet that smelled of fear. No one knew exactly what would happen, but everyone knew the building had changed. Nia sat in a straight-back chair inside a small meeting room with frosted glass walls, her uniform still marked by dust from the maintenance lane. Amara sat beside her, hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Across from them, one compliance officer typed notes with neutral efficiency while another reviewed preliminary timestamps from access logs. Outside the glass, employees kept glancing in as they passed, not at Amara, at Nia, the troublesome cleaner, the disruptive one, the woman Valeria had spent days teaching them to dismiss. Now the branch itself seemed unsure what she was. A soft knock came. The door opened and Cade stepped in under escort. His eyes found Nia's first, not because he meant anything by it in public, but because fear had finally burned down to alignment. We recovered the corrected stock movement sheet, he said, voice raw but steady. Unsigned. The compliance officer looked up. From where? Operation support drawers, Cade replied. Second cabinet near the shared printer. It was placed beneath archived maintenance forms. Interesting. Not destroyed. Hidden. The compliance officer typed that in. Amara turned slightly toward Nia and whispered, that means he was telling the truth. Nia did not answer, but she let herself breathe once deeper than before. Truth was beginning to acquire shape. Then the door opened again. This time Valeria entered, not alone, not as a guest, as a subject under review. One legal officer stood beside her. Another remained just outside. Yet even under scrutiny, Valeria carried herself like a woman who had not fully accepted the possibility of defeat. Her blouse remained immaculate. Her spine remained straight. Her lipstick remained untouched, though the color in her face had thinned. She looked at Nia once, then at the compliance officer. You said you wanted one final clarification before formal statement signing, she said. The officer nodded toward the remaining chair. Sit, please. Valeria sat. No one offered her water. That, more than anything, seemed to irritate her. The officer folded his hands. We have preliminary evidence of altered maintenance records, an unsigned false stock movement sheet, a staged internal disciplinary pattern involving multiple support staff, and probable obstruction surrounding a physical incident involving employee Preston Mashigo. Before we move this to central legal escalation, is there anything you would like to amend in your prior account? Valeria gave a soft exhale meant to sound insulted rather than frightened. Yes, she said, I would like to amend my confidence in this process. The officer did not react. Valeria went on, her tone gathering polish. I have managed this branch under extreme performance pressure for years. I have reduced waste, improved operational discipline, and corrected a culture of lower-level complacency that was costing this company money every quarter. Some people do not appreciate standards when they are accustomed to disorder. Her gaze slid briefly toward Nia. There it is, Amara whispered under her breath. Nia stayed still. Valeria continued. And now, because one or two emotional staff members feel uncomfortable being corrected suddenly, I am being treated like a criminal. Cade let out a sound that was almost a laugh, but pain swallowed it before it fully formed. The compliance officer opened a file. What is your explanation for your access card being present near the restricted solvent incident in the VIP corridor? Valeria did not blink. I passed through many operational areas. A drop card proves nothing. What is your explanation for your assistant entering lower finance with an unlogged envelope before Zora was accused of petty cash interference? Valeria's jaw tightened a fraction. Routine admin transfer. What is your explanation for ghost vendor overlap between maintenance expense clusters and a vendor family linked to a holding company address previously used by your brother-in-law? This time silence. Small, sharp, devastating. Valeria turned so fast her chair almost scraped. Cade's eyes widened. Nia felt the air shift. There it was, the financial nerve. Valeria smiled then, but the smile came a little too late. That is a reckless leap. The officer said, "Is it false?" Valeria lifted her chin. "It is unproven," which was not the same answer. The officer noted that too. Then another knock came. The legal director entered and handed a folder to the compliance officer. He skimmed one page, then another. His face did not change, but the room itself seemed to tighten around the paper in his hands. "Thank you," he said to the legal director. When the door closed again, he looked up at Valeria. "We've recovered an audio file from employee Preston's phone draft," he said. "Would you like to hear the relevant segment?" For the first time, Valeria's composure slipped visibly. Only for a second, but everyone saw it. "Audio can be manipulated," she said quickly. The officer pressed play anyway. Static came first. The faint hum of what sounded like a record's room vent. Then voices. Pierce's nervous and low. "If the cleaner talks to Central Review, the vendor trail won't hold." Then Valeria's voice. Clearer, colder. "Then she must be buried under conduct before anyone cares what she says." A pause. Pierce again, and the one from Stores. Valeria. "If he copies anything, deal with it before the deadline." The recording ended. No one moved. Amara had both hands over her mouth. Cade stared at Valeria with naked horror now, as if part of him still could not believe he had spent so long protecting a system this rotten. Nia felt no triumph yet, only a deep, terrible steadiness. Valeria recovered with startling speed. Context matters. Those words refer to internal performance management and document containment. Document containment, the officer repeated flatly. Yes, and deal with it before the deadline refers to what? Valeria opened her mouth. No answer came quickly enough. That was when the legal director returned once more, but this time she did not address the compliance officer first. She addressed the room. "Mr. Kane has requested all core participants in the current review assemble in the main executive conference hall." The words landed like a hammer. Main executive hall. Public enough to be devastating, private enough to be final. Valeria rose slowly. "That seems unnecessary." The legal director met her gaze. "That decision has already been made." A chill ran through Nia, though her face remained composed. This was it. The hall was on the upper floor, a place where lower-tier staff almost never stood unless summoned for discipline or service. Nia had cleaned the corridor outside it days earlier, while executives passed with the unconscious arrogance of people who believed important things only happened near their own shoes. Now she entered through those same doors in her janitor's uniform. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Inside the room gleamed with controlled luxury. Long walnut table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, silent screens mounted against one wall. But today, the seats were not arranged for strategy. They were arranged for exposure. Valeria stood at one end under legal watch. Pierce had been brought in, gray-faced and sweating. Cade stood near the side wall, beside two security supervisors. Amara remained close to Nia. Tiana and Zora had been asked up as material witnesses. Even Jamal stood near the back, hat in hand, his tired shoulders squared with a dignity the building had not earned. And near the head of the room stood Darius Kane. He did not sit, he waited. When the last door closed, silence rolled across the hall. Then Valeria made her final mistake. She turned slightly enough for the room to hear her voice clearly and said with weary contempt, "Must this circus continue because of a cleaner who doesn't understand her place?" No one answered. Darius looked at her for one long, unreadable moment. Then he walked past the head chair, past the legal director, past the compliance files, and stopped directly in front of Nia. The entire room forgot how to breathe. Nia did not move, not because she felt nothing, but because she felt too much. He looked down at her plain uniform, the worn shoes, the dust still marking the hem where branch cruelty had tried to grind her into something small. Then, in full view of every person in that room, Darius reached out his hand, not as CEO to worker, as a man to the woman he loved. Nia stared at him, one heartbeat, then placed her hand in his. He helped her stand beside him. Gasps broke across the conference hall like glass under pressure. Valeria went white. Amara's eyes filled instantly. Tiana closed her eyes once as if some private suspicion had finally become too large to contain. And Darius said with devastating calm, "For the avoidance of any further confusion, this woman is not a disruptive cleaner in my company." He turned slightly enough that everyone could see Nia beside him. "She is my wife." The silence that followed felt almost holy. No one shifted. No one coughed. No one looked away. Valeria's lips parted, but no words came. Darius continued. Her name is Nia Kane. She entered this branch with my knowledge because concerns had already been raised about internal culture, staff intimidation, and procurement irregularities. What she experienced here was not disorder from below, it was abuse from above. Every sentence hit like a verdict. He did not rush, he did not shout, he let the truth arrive at the speed of collapse. Then he turned to the screen wall. Display file sequence. One of the compliance officers obeyed. The first screen showed the solvent access logs, Valeria's card, time-stamped. The second showed the unsigned false disciplinary templates used against Zora and Nia, pulled from an operations draft folder. The third showed vendor payments routed through shell-linked maintenance accounts tied to addresses connected to Valeria's extended family. The fourth showed internal message metadata between Valeria's assistant and Pierce. Then the audio transcript appeared, line by line, irrefutable. A sound escaped Pierce, then small, strangled. Almost childlike, he sank into a chair and covered his face. Valeria tried one final defense. This is manipulation, she said, though her voice had frayed. This woman has influenced you. She has turned personal intimacy into corporate bias. Darius looked at her as one might look at something already broken beyond rescue. No, he said, you mistook class cruelty for management, you mistook fear for loyalty, and you mistook my silence for blindness. Then he gave the order that ended her. Effective immediately, Valeria Lang is terminated for gross misconduct pending criminal referral and civil recovery review. Pierce is suspended under the same process. Full internal protection is extended to staff witnesses in this branch. Valeria swayed once, only once. Then the legal team moved in. As they did, Eleanor Kane appeared in the open doorway at the rear of the hall, having arrived too late to control anything and just in time to hear everything. Her eyes went first to Darius, then to Nia, then to the screen, and in that instant she understood the full obscenity of what her prejudice had helped protect. She did not speak. She could not. Nia saw the realization strike her like age. The room remained frozen in the aftermath. Justice had not shouted. It had simply stood up and named itself. And in that hall of polished wood and expensive silence, the woman they had ordered to kneel was now the only one standing without shame. After Valeria Lang was led out of the executive conference hall, no one moved for several seconds. It was not because the room had nothing left to say. It was because too much had just been said at once. The great windows of the hall still overlooked the city. Cars still moved below. Phones still vibrated in pockets. Somewhere in another wing, a printer was probably spitting out invoices no one would look at until later. The world outside had not paused, but inside that room, a hierarchy had died. Nia stood beside Darius with her hand still in his, though neither of them seemed fully aware of it. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, and yet the air still felt heavy, not only with victory, but with the wreckage truth always left behind when it arrived too late. Amara began crying first, not loudly, just sudden, exhausted tears she could no longer stop. That small sound broke the spell. Zora sat down hard in the nearest chair and covered her face with both hands. Jamal let out one deep breath through his nose as though he had been holding it for years. Tiana remained standing, but her chin trembled once before she steadied it again. Cade looked as if he had stepped out of one life and had not yet understood how to stand inside the next. Darius finally turned toward the room. His voice when he spoke was calm but not distant anymore. Everyone directly affected by this review will receive formal protection notices before the end of today, he said. No retaliations, no demotions, no quiet transfers. Anyone who attempts interference with witness staff will answer to Central Legal and Executive Office. This time when the staff looked at him, they were not looking only at a CEO. They were looking at a man who had let the truth tear through his own building rather than protect its image. That mattered. The legal director stepped forward and began giving practical instructions. Medical transport for Preston, immediate statement scheduling, payroll protection, access restoration. It was necessary, order had to return somehow, but for Nia, everything beyond one point had blurred. Eleanor Kane was walking toward her. The older woman stopped 2 steps away. For the first time since Nia had known her, Eleanor did not carry herself like a matriarch entering a room she naturally owned. She looked diminished, not in status but in certainty. Elegant as always, controlled as always, yet the control was now built over something shaken open. Her eyes moved over Nia's uniform. The faded fabric, the worn shoes, the calluses on her hands that had become more visible after days of labor. When Eleanor finally spoke, her voice was quieter than Nia had ever heard it. I did not know. Nia met her gaze. No, you did not. It was not a cruel answer. That made it harder. Eleanor lowered her eyes for a second, then raised them again. I thought I was protecting my family. Darius turned toward her, and this time there was no son's hesitation left in him. You were protecting comfort, he said, not family. The word struck cleanly. Eleanor accepted it without protest because there was nothing left to defend. She had heard Valeria's voice, seen the records, watched the woman she had quietly trusted exposed as a fraud. Worst of all, she had watched herself in the reflection of that deception and understood what made it possible. Not malice, vanity, class prejudice, the old belief that polished people must be safer than humble ones. Nia saw all of that, crossing Eleanor's face, and the sight brought no pleasure, only sadness. That was one of the bitter truths of justice. Sometimes the guilty were monstrous, sometimes they were simply proud enough to make evil easier for others. Eleanor looked at Nia again. I owe you an apology. Nia was silent. Eleanor continued, and now there was visible effort in each word. Not only for doubting you, for the ways I measured you, for the ways I treated gentleness as weakness and simplicity as embarrassment. I saw what I wanted to see because it was easier than asking whether I had become the kind of woman who confuses status with character. The room had grown quieter around them. Even legal staff paused without seeming to. Nia could have answered with bitterness. She had earned that right. She could have listed every slight, every polished dismissal, every time Eleanor had looked at her as if love alone had not made her worthy of standing beside Darius. Instead, she asked softly, do you understand now what happens when people think dignity belongs only to the powerful? Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Yes. Nia nodded once. Then do better. It was neither absolution nor rejection. It was harder than either. Eleanor swallowed and stepped back, changed not by humiliation alone, but by being given a responsibility she could not perform publicly and forget privately. Across the hall, Tiana approached slowly. She stopped in front of Nia and looked at Darius first. So, she said dryly, I was right. For the first time that afternoon, a fragile ripple of laughter moved through the room. Nia smiled. About what? You are not from this kind of work. Nia's smile deepened, but only a little. No, but I am from people who were. That silenced everyone again, this time gently. Tiana's eyes softened. She reached out and took one of Nia's hands in both of hers. Then do not forget them now that this room knows your name. I won't, Nia said. I know, Tiana replied. Later, after medical staff had taken Preston away to hospital, after Cade had signed his full statement, after Zora's suspension risk had been formally erased, and after Amara had been escorted downstairs to rest because the shock was still shaking through her body, the branch began emptying into evening. Not normal evening. Aftermath evening. The kind when people walked through corridors differently because they had seen something that could not be unseen. Nia returned briefly to the lower staff area with Darius beside her. No entourage, no legal team, no performance, just the two of them. She stood in the service corridor where she had entered the building days earlier through the same dented metal doors used by workers no one important ever noticed. The corridor looked smaller now, or perhaps clearer. Darius stood at her shoulder for a moment before speaking. I am sorry. Nia did not look at him immediately. For which part? The honesty of the question made him wince. For leaving you standing alone in that corridor today. She turned then. You had to. Yes, and for needing that to be true. That was better, more accurate. Nia studied his face. He looked tired in a way money could not soften. There were shadows under his eyes and a heaviness in his mouth that told her he had been carrying too many competing obligations at once. Evidence, timing, exposure, legal control, her safety, his own anger. Still, pain did not disappear just because strategy had a reason. I knew what you were doing, she said. I was not sure you would forgive it. Nia considered that. I have not decided yet. A faint, broken smile touched his mouth. That too was honest. He stepped closer. When I saw you there in that uniform while she spoke to you like that. He stopped and tried again. There are moments when power feels useless. That was one of them. Nia's anger softened at the edges. You still came. I should have come sooner. Yes, she said. He accepted that without defense. Then he reached into his jacket and held out something small. The old plastic access card Valeria had dropped near the solvent trap. You kept the first crack, he said. Nia took it and looked down at the scratched surface. Strange, she thought, that a piece of cheap plastic could hold the beginning of a collapse. She was arrogant, Nia said. She was protected, Darius replied. That mattered more. They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding that what had happened in the branch was larger than one villain. Valeria had been vicious, yes. Pierce had been weak. The assistants and supervisors had been complicit. But the system had fed on something wider. Class blindness, polished indifference. The belief that support workers existed beneath moral attention. That was the real thing they had to destroy. What will you do? Nia asked. Darius looked down the long corridor. Central audit of all branch-level maintenance and support contracts. Anonymous reporting line independent from local management. Mandatory labor dignity review for every regional executive. His expression hardened. And I want direct board oversight on wage tier abuse complaints. Nia listened. Then she said, not enough. His eyebrows lifted. She continued, restitution fund for workers who lost wages through false deductions, education grants for lowest paid staff families, promotion pathways that do not require the polish of rich schools. Now Darius did smile, though tiredly. You come into my company for a short time and redesign it. I came into your company, Nia said, and saw where human worth was being budgeted incorrectly. That deserved no argument. He took her hand again. This time no one was watching. Night had fallen by the time they left the branch, but they did not return directly home. Instead, Darius asked the driver to stop at the hospital where Preston had been taken. The fluorescent hallway outside the recovery ward was plain, the chairs uncomfortable, the coffee terrible. Yet the moment Nia stepped inside, something in the day finally completed itself. Amara was there already, eyes tired but clearer now. Cade sat hunched forward with both hands clasped as if still holding himself together by force. Zora stood near the window speaking softly to Jamal. Tiana had somehow brought food in plastic containers because older women who had survived too much always knew that justice alone did not feed people. When they saw Nia and Darius enter together openly, simply, the room changed, not into awe, into belonging. No one bowed, no one panicked. Amara stood first. They said he will recover. Relief moved through all of them at once. Nia closed her eyes briefly. Good. Tiana thrust a food container toward her. Then eat. Nia laughed despite everything. That is your answer to every crisis. It has kept people alive longer than speeches, Tiana replied. Even Darius laughed at that. And in that poor hospital corridor under unforgiving lights, and beside the world that had nearly taught itself not to see, healing began not as a grand event but as a series of small human acts that refused to let suffering have the last word. Later, the main branch would reopen under interim leadership. Workers wronged under Valeria would be compensated. Contracts would be audited. Names long ignored would be heard in rooms that had once valued only polished accents. Eleanor would come more than once to sit with Nia, not to perform guilt, but to learn how to become smaller in the right ways. Cade would be offered ethics training and a restored path upward. Amara would accept a scholarship through the new staff development program. Zora would laugh more easily. Jamal would finally receive overdue wages and a public commendation that embarrassed him deeply. Tiana would refuse all ceremony and ask instead for better shoes for the cleaners. And Nia, who had entered through the service door as if she did not matter, would help rebuild the company from the floor upward. Because she knew something too many leaders forgot. A building is judged from its lobby, but a company is judged by how it treats the person mopping the floor when no important guests are watching. In life, the truest measure of a person is not how they treat those above them, but how they treat those they believe can do nothing for them. The story of Nia reminds us that character is revealed most clearly in moments when no reward is expected, when kindness is inconvenient, and when power could easily be abused without consequence. Too often the world teaches people to admire status, wealth, titles, polished appearances, and powerful voices, but time and truth always expose what lies beneath appearances. A beautiful office can hide corruption, a polished smile can hide cruelty, and sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the strongest heart of all. Nia did not win because she was rich, powerful, or feared. She won because she never abandoned her integrity even when humiliation would have been easier, even when silence would have protected her, and even when standing for truth cost her comfort. Her courage teaches us that dignity is not something given by wealth or position. It is something carried in the soul. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all is this. Every act of cruelty leaves a mark, but so does every act of courage. When one person chooses to stand up, speak honestly, and protect those who are weaker, that courage can inspire others to do the same. One brave voice can awaken many silent hearts. So never underestimate the power of your integrity. Never think kindness makes you weak, and never believe the truth loses simply because it takes time to rise. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. What part moved you the most, and have you ever seen someone judged unfairly because of their status or appearance? And if you love emotional stories about justice, healing, and powerful life lessons, don't forget to subscribe and join the family for more stories like this.